Hey, welcome. This is Lee Waller, and I'm going to be taking a look at creating text in Blender and then importing that into Unreal Engine. The reason I'm doing this is Unreal Engine is still pretty much developing the motion media design tools, and the text tool, as far as creating text with extrudes and bevels, is not well developed. So there's some geometry that it's not real good at creating right now. So I'm going to jump into Blender and take a look at its text tools and how to create these extrusions and bevels, then export that out of Blender, import it into Unreal. Now, the catch there is if you want to separate the front, the extrusion, the bevel, and the back on that text, you're going to have to do a little bit of work in Unreal. So I'm going to start in Blender. This is the normal default Blender scene. I'm going to get rid of the cube. And then I'm going to start with some text. Go up here and add text. And I'll zoom in on this. I'm going to hit the N key to bring out this panel here. I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees on the X. And for the text properties here, I'll jump down right here and hit this A. I want to go to the font because I want to change this. Go to regular right here and click on this folder icon. That's going to open up all of my fonts. For this, I'm going to use Century Gothic Bold Italic right there and then open that font. I want to change this text, so go to Object Mode right here and let's change that to Edit Mode. And I'm going to select that text. And the project I'm working on is an animation for the planet Venus. So I'm going to type in that text real quick. Then we'll go back to Object Mode. And I'm going to begin to work on creating my text now. There is one more thing I want to do. Let me just move this over a little bit. I want to scale the text up, and I want it to be around the size of what Unreal Engine is used to working in. I'm going to kind of set that to the normal height of a person, which is around 180 centimeters. I'm going to change the units that Blender is working in. It works in meters, and Unreal Engine works in centimeters. To do that, I'm going to go right here to the scene properties. I'm going to go to units, and I'm going to change this from meters to centimeters. Make sure my text is selected and then hit the S key, and I'm going to scale that up till I get it around 180. And that'll work right there. Back in our text mode right here, I'm going to close up the font. We're going to go into the geometry tab right there. First thing I'll do is extrude this, and I'm just going to extrude that by 5 centimeters. And then down here on the bevel, I'm going to go right here to the profile. You have a couple of options here. I'm going to move past the round and the object. I'm going to go to this profile here. With that, you have the ability to kind of create your own profile. I'm going to set some depth to that to 1 right now. And you'll see that based on this profile, we have that profile applied to the bevel. To demonstrate this profile right here, I'm going to go back and set this to 0 on the X right there. And then I'm going to move in and so I've laid the text down and then I've navigated to the top of the text. And so this is the profile starting right here to here. Again, it matches from here to here. And that helps if you want to create your own profile for this. So just to demonstrate that, I'll just grab right here, bring that in. And you can see now it's sloping in that way. So if we wanted to do something extra on that, you can see how we can begin to create that profile. For the bevel profile I want to use, I'm going to go to preset right here, and I'm going to go with this cornice molding right there. That's been applied, but it doesn't look quite right. So what we need to do is right here on resolution is bring that up. I'd say at least bring that up to 20. You can see now we have all of these faces curved and bent the correct way. So if you want a little more on that resolution, just keep in mind though, that that will add geometry to your text. Probably not going to be enough to really be a problem, but if you want a little more resolution on that, you can keep going up on that number. I'm going to go back here now and I'm going to set that back to 90 degrees and go back and look at this now. And so we have that extrude set up. I want this to be a little bit more pronounced. So I'm going to go back into my tools here And on my depth, I'm going to bring that up to 2. And you'll notice that it is pushing the text outward. So I'm going to bring that in just a little bit, and I'll set this offset to a -1 to kind of counteract that. Now that the text is set up, there's a little more prep work that needs to be done. This is a little more tedious process, but I'm going to need each one of these letters separated out to export and then import. So I'm going to need to make a copy of each of these. First thing I'm going to do, though, is I'm just going to bring this down to 1 letter. So I'll go back into edit mode and just get rid of the rest of the word and delete that out. Go back to object mode. Then we'll copy this 4 more times. Control C, Control V, so that I have 5 instances of that letter. And then I'm going to go through each one of these and spell out the rest of the word. I'll come back once I have that finished. I have the whole word spelled out here, all 5 letters here, and I've named them according to their letter. For this scene, I'm going to go ahead and select the light and the camera and delete those also. We're going to need to export all of this, but before we do that, one last thing is we're going to need to select all of these, and we're going to need to convert them to a mesh. So with them selected like this, and now we'll go up to Object and we'll drop down to Convert and Convert to Mesh. They're all now a mesh, so we can export this. Up here, we'll go to File, Export, and I'm going to export as an FBX. I'm just going to drop this on my desktop real quick, and I'll label this Venus and hit Export. So at this point, we're done in Blender. We'll need to go into Unreal Engine. I've opened up a project in Unreal Engine that I've already been working on. In the scene, I have a sphere that I've placed in there, and the texture that is wrapped on it is a texture of Venus that I've downloaded from the internet. Here it is in Material Designer. I've actually gone into the emissive, and I've added that texture in. So there is that texture. And again, I've just opened it up. I've downloaded that from the internet. So just search for Venus textures and you'll find a number of options there, and you can add that in. And on the channel settings for that emissive, I've set that to a 0.5. The floor is just a flat rectangle. And again, on the material there, it's just a black that I've added in on the base color right there. And I do have a spotlight right here that is pointing back towards the camera to add in a little bit of this extra glow. I have created some other materials for this project for the text in particular. For the front of this text, on the base channel there, I have 2 layers set up. The top layer is this texture right here, and this is just a texture that was in the engine. It's this T_default_macro variation. And the next layer on this is just a simple color layer. So select that, and the color there that I have, that hexadecimal is 013844FF. 013844FF. And I've left everything else as is. Once you've created that, save it out as MD_front. That way we will know that's going to be the front of the material. The next material is the bevel. On the base color right there, I changed that layer to a color, and then that color is A27600FF. A27600FF. And I made changes on the roughness and the metallic. I set both of those layers to a color and then made them white. And then in the channels layer here, I set the roughness to 0.4. I saved that one as MD_bevel. And then the one for our extrude, we'll take a look at the base color first. Again, this layer is just a color, and that color, the hexadecimal for it is 442E00FF. 442E00FF. I did the same on the roughness and metallic. I made those a color channel and then set them both to white. And then on the channels right here, to mix those, I brought the roughness down to 0.2. Again, you can go up there, save that out, and we'll have those 3 materials we can use a little bit later. I'm going to close that out. And now let's start taking a look at our text. We're going to need to import that. I'm going to go here to the content drawer and go to the main content. And I'm going to create a folder for all of this, new folder, and imported meshes. And open that up. And we'll import right there, right click. We're going to go up to the top, import. I set that on my desktop. There it is right there, that Venus.fbx. Double click on that. And I'm going to go with the defaults on this. So just hit import. And that imports all of those 5 pieces of text. I'm just going to go ahead and hit Control S to save them. We are going to need to process each one of these letters. So I'm going to take you through that process a couple of times. I'm going to start with the V, and I'll go ahead and drag that in and just place it in there. I'm going to start off, we'll need to change into the modeling mode right here. And I'm also going to jump out of the main camera, go right here and go to, if you're not on the default viewport right there, select it. And I'm going to jump into perspective right here. And that's going to allow me to move the camera around. First thing I'm going to do is change the pivot point on this. And so that pivot point's right down here. I'm going to go into edit pivot point and I'm going to center that and set that to the bottom. And then I'll hit accept on that. We're going to need to straighten out the UVs for this. So down here in the more button, I'll go to UVs and I'm just going to auto UV this. This has to do with mapping the materials onto the mesh. With that done, I'm going to hit accept. I'm going to go back into transform now. And even though this is a static mesh, when I was working on this earlier, I found that there was a problem with the materials staying assigned to their material slots whenever I would drop these meshes into a cloner. The workaround that I found for this is we're going to need to go ahead and convert these one more time to a static mesh. So again, with it selected, I'm going to hit convert, make sure that's on static mesh, and then hit accept. The next step is we're going to need to assign polygroups to this. And then after we've assigned the polygroups, we can then assign material slots to those polygroups. For the polygroups, again, with that mesh selected, I'm going to go right here to mesh and then try select. I'm going to set the size of this brush down to 0.1. And I want to select this right here, the selection mode. I want to make sure on this first one, it's all in group. And we're going to select the front face and the back face. Select the front face and then we'll move around to the back, select it, and we're going to make both of those into a new polygroup. Drop down here in our menu and go to create polygroup, and then we'll hit accept. I'm going to move around back to the front of this. We'll go back into try select again. This time on the selection mode, I'm going to drop down to all within angle, and I'm going to work on the extrusion here. I'll select this, and we're going to need to go around and select all of the faces on this. So this take a moment. Let me jump up here, select the tops, and then select that angle, then slide around and select these sides. And then we'll still need to get the bottom of this. I'm going to hide the floor so we can see this, and then drop down here and grab that right there. And now we can make all of this into a polygroup. So we'll drop down in our menu and go create polygroup and accept. And then we have one more back into try select. We want to select the bevel, and I'm going to clear that. You can see we're having a little trouble with that. Let me go right here to selection mode and do all in group. Let's see if that's going to work. That's working now. Let's see. I'm going to go around to the back and select right in there. So we have the front and the back bevel selected. If you're running into trouble with that, and let me clear the selection, I'll show you another way of getting to that if you're having issues with that. You can select your front face, then you can also select your extrude. And let me go back around here and get the back face. And then you can invert that selection so that you have your two bevels. So either way, you can select that, and we need to make that into a polygroup. and then I'm going to hit accept. So now we should have those 3 polygroups created, and we can now add material slots to them. For the material slots, I'm going to go here and drop down to attributes right there, and we're going to edit materials. To explain this menu a little bit, I'm going to adjust my brush size again, set that to 0.1. On selection mode, right now I'm going to go with all in group, and I'm going to select the front face and then move around and select the back face. And we can assign a material slot to this. We only have 1 material slot right now available to us. We'll add 2 more in just a moment, but that index 0 right there corresponds with this 0 right here, and that is the active material. So whatever the active material is, we're going to assign that to our selection, and you can see that option right there. Click that button, and now we have assigned that material to our front and back face. Hit accept. Nothing changes, but we'll add the materials in just a moment. I'm going to go back into edit materials, and we'll follow that again, but this time we're going to add in a new material slot. I'm going to click once right there, and you'll see we have that new material slot. We'll make sure that it is selected, and then we can go in here and we should be able to select our bevel. So I'm going to select that front one and then swing around and select the back one. And again, it's the one that is active, and we'll drop down here and assign active material and then hit accept. And we'll do that one more time for the extrusion. Go into edit materials, and we can select the extrusion. We'll need to add in a new material. Click on a new material. We have that 3rd material right there. Make sure that is the one that's active, and now we'll go and assign that. And we can accept. And now we should have 3 material slots for this V. And to look at that over here in our details for that V right there, you'll see those 3 material slots. We can now go ahead and assign materials to them. Right here, we'll go to our drop down, and I'll just search for front on that, and that'll bring up our front material. And then on our next slot right there, I'll search bevel. There is the bevel that we created. And then here, extrusion. So now we've applied our materials to the letter. The next letter I'm going to work on is the S. It's a little more complicated, so let me bring that in. I'm going to drop it in there. I'm going to go ahead and hide our V for right now and our floor. And then I'll just position this a little bit. I'm going to jump out of our camera right there so I can move around. All right, so what we'll need to do is start off. I need to go over here back to modeling mode, and I'm going to transform this, change that pivot location, hit accept. I'm going to go in here and work on the UVs. Go ahead and auto UV this. Accept that. And then back in the transform mode, we'll need to convert this again to a static mesh. Static mesh, hit accept. Now we can start setting up our polygroups. We'll go into mesh right here. Then I'm going to go into tri-select, and I'm going to go for the front face and the back face. Let me set this to 0.1. Select the front face, and then move around to the back there and select the back face. And we can set this up for create polygroup. Hit accept. And then I'm going to go back in to tri-select. I'm going to get the extrusion, and this will be the part that'll take a little bit of time. I'm going to change the selection mode from all in group to all within angle, and I'll set this to 25. And this will take a little bit of time, but I want to stay within this face here as we move through. So I'm going to zoom in just a little bit and start scrubbing through here. So I've gone through and selected the face of the extrude. So we'll go ahead now and make that a polygroup and accept that. And then we have one more back in the tri-select. And I'm going to change this over to all in group. And then I'm going to just set this back down to 1. I'll select the front face and then move around. I'll select the extrusion there and then keep moving on around to the back face. With those selected, I'll invert that selection. And now those 2 bevels are selected. So we can create a polygroup out of those. We'll accept that. Now we need to create our material slots. So down here under More, I'm going to go into Attributes, select that S, and then we'll go in and edit the materials. I'll go with the front face and the back face first. Select both of those. And we'll create this first material right here and assign that to that polygroup and hit Accept. Go back into Edit Materials. And before I click on anything, I'm going to bring this brush size down to 0.01. And then we can select that bevel, and then we'll swing around and select this other bevel. And we can add in a new material. Click the plus button right there. And then we'll select it. And now we can assign that and accept. And the last one we have will be the extrusion. We swing over here just a little bit and select it. And then we'll add in our third material slot right there. Select it, drop down and assign that. And then we can accept. We can check that now. And so over here on that S, we'll have those 3 material slots. We can add in those materials. And so now we've got our S set up. So for each of the letters, you'll need to complete that process. I've gone through and set up all 5 letters. And so now I'm going to take a look at animating these. We'll use a cloner and an effector to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and right here in cloners, I'm going to drop in this free placement. In the Motion Design Outliner, I'm going to open up that cloner and delete the default clone right there. I'm going to make some space for this, and I'm going to move that cloner down just so I can organize this a little bit better. And then I'll select all 5 of our letters and drag them into the cloner, make them a child of the cloner. And so now they are part of that cloner, and that means that we can use an effector on them to animate them in. Let me make a little more room here, and then I'm going to drop down and create linked effector on this cloner. I'm going to change the cloner type from a sphere to a box. On this cloner, there is the inner effector and then the outer effector. I'm going to adjust the size and position of both of those. We want the inner effector to encompass the text, and the outer effector will adjust based on the animation we want to create. I'm going to jump out of that camera so I can swing around and just get a look at this a little bit better. You can see the red inner effector and the blue outer effector. I'm going to bring this down to center up with the text a little bit better. And then I'm going to adjust these right here. I'm going to set both of these to free, and let's see, on this for the inner effector, I think I'll set that to 75, our Y to 370, and our Z to 120. We can check that. You can see now that the inner effector, the red box here, appears to be, we should be good. Yep, it is encompassing the entire text. Then I'll make adjustments on the outer. On the X, I'm going to set that to 80. On the Y, I'm going to set that one to 700. And then on the Z, I'll set that to 125. To animate the text in, I want each letter to scale up and rotate in one at a time. To do that, we're going to need to set our rotation and scale here. I'm going to scrub the rotation just to show you. That's how our text is going to animate in one letter at a time. So I'm going to go ahead and set that to a -90 right there. And then we'll also set the scale down to 0. To animate this, we're going to use the effector. I'm going to go down here into my sequencer. I've set this up for 30 frames per second, and I've given us 10 seconds on that. I'm going to set this to start around 30 frames right there. I'll go up here to my transform controls. On location, I'm going to move this, and so that I can see this, let me jump back into our main camera. And I'll move this off to the side. Right now, they're animated in, so I'm going to need to invert this. So right down here under shape on invert type, we'll check that. But I know that's where I want this to start. So back at my transform controls, I'll set a keyframe right there, and I'll just do 2 seconds on this animation, and then we'll set that back to 0 and set that keyframe. And now we can take a look at the animation. And so as that effector passes by, you can see that the animation starts with the outer effector starting to scale up and rotate the text. And by the time that we've gotten to the inner effector, that animation is completed. A few things to take into consideration with this animation is if you want to set these to linear so that the effector moves at a constant rate across, set both of those to linear. And then if you want to play around with the easing of how each of these letters pop in, you can work with these ramps right here on the ease setting. Just to take a look at that, I'll try the Outback and see how that looks. So you can experiment with the easing ramps to get the look that you want. I hope this has been helpful. For more on digital content creation, hit the like and subscribe button and check out my other tutorials.